Hello, everyone. Welcome to Winthrop in the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is John Deaton. John is a former Marine. You're originally from Michigan, now living in Bolton out in Western Mass, and you were running for the U.S. Senate, your second campaign. You ran 2 years ago against Elizabeth Warren, and now running this year against Ed Markey. Is that right?
That is correct.
Well,
my second time.
Well, thank you, and welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and so maybe that's the first question: is why are you running again? And obviously, it's no surprise to anyone that your odds are not thought of as particularly strong in Massachusetts because of the Democratic-Republican lineup. So why do it? What are you looking for?
Well, one, I think that Massachusetts is in a crisis with one-party control here. If you look at every statewide office, all 9 members of the House and both U.S. senators are all one party. And I think that one party has taken the voter for granted. If you look at the audit, 72% of the voters demanded an audit, made it the law, and they won't do it. And I think that if you look at Massachusetts, the challenges facing Massachusetts, dead last in housing affordability, dead last in private sector job growth, 1.1 million people on food stamps. We need a balance in Massachusetts. And so I ran against Elizabeth Warren as a first-time candidate. No one knew who I was. And although I got beat handedly, I was the first Republican in Massachusetts in many years for U.S. Senate to get over 40%. 1.35 million people voted for me. And this time around, I don't have a primary opponent. And so instead of just trying to convince Republicans that I'm a reasonable alternative, that the Boston Globe, which is not a bastion of conservatism, called me, described me, I can take that message to the 64% independents, unenrolled voters, including disenfranchised Democrats who agree that someone who isn't loyal to a party and isn't loyal to a person, but's loyal to people, get a chance to go in office. And so I think that if I make that case, that I do have a chance to unseat Ed Markey, who is a nice man, but his first year in Washington was 1976. I think it's time for change.
Yep, okay. Do you have a strategy that you will do differently this time than you did 2 years ago?
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul. Experience is the greatest teacher, and I had none. There were times when I showed it, but the main issue here in Massachusetts, the real struggle is it favors incumbents because the primary is September. Okay. Other states, it's March. New York, it's June. And so you have all summer to make the case. When you're in a contested primary and you win, like I did, by 65%, when you count early mail-in voting, you only have 6 weeks to try to switch from the primary to the general. Right. So I don't have a primary challenger. The Massachusetts GOP said, you know what? He did okay for his first time. He's the first Republican to get that many votes in many, many years for U.S. Senate. We're going to endorse him outright, and I can now take that case. And so the reality is I get to, in many ways, ignore the 8% of Republicans that are in this state as registered Republicans and take the case to the independents who really will decide the election.
So, okay, I hear that. You are running as a Republican, and we obviously have an administration in Washington that is Republican that you would be working with, and a U.S. Senate that's Republican that you'd be working with. And there's maybe disagreements in the state on a lot of things, but there doesn't seem, there seems to be some uniformity of unhappiness with what they see coming out of Washington. I mean, I guess first question, do you support the current administration? Did you vote for them?
I had 3 chances to vote for President Trump, and I voted for him 0 times. And I won the Republican primary not supporting President Trump. That's why I just said a minute ago, I don't have a loyalty to a person or a party. That's what distinguishes me from Ed Markey. Ed Markey is a proud Democrat. John Deaton, a proud American. Those are 2 fundamentally different things. Ed Markey always puts party politics first. I will put people first. And so, yes, I am the Republican nominee, and that's fine. But here's what we need, Paul. We need someone who will go to Washington who's a maybe. Ed Markey is a no on anything that comes out of the federal office. If you look at both him and Seth Moulton, their message is they will fight Trump harder. Well, President Trump is only going to be the president for 3 years. your whole platform is you're going to vote, you're going to fight against someone who's not going to be there. I think that the people are ready for someone to fight for something, for people. There's one test that should be applied as a U.S. Senator. It shouldn't matter who the president is, Paul. That one test is it good for Massachusetts and America? If it is, support it. If you want to call it progressive, if it's good for Massachusetts, America, I'll support it. You want to call it conservative, I'll support it. If it's not good for Massachusetts and America, you don't support it. And you don't determine it based on what party's in office or who the president is. You just apply that simple test and it'll govern you.
So what would be a specific example of something you've seen Ed Markey do? And again, I should make clear for everyone, Ed Markey is running against Seth Moulton, who's a congressman here.
Yes.
And that race is not determined. Like the polling it shows Senator Markey ahead, I believe.
It does.
Yeah. So, which is why you're focusing on him more, plus being the incumbent. But what's something that you've seen Senator Markey do that is like, this is why I'm running?
Well, I would say let's talk about energy prices. Ed Markey is the co-author of the Green New Deal. He favors, he pushes offshore wind and solar. And I have solar panels on my house. By the way, Ed Markey doesn't. Okay. Either in Malden or in Chevy Chase, Maryland. I drive a full electric vehicle. I'm not sure if Ed does now. But the point being is that you can't force alternative energy mandates arbitrarily. You have to have a common sense approach to energy transition. For example, I'm a big proponent of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy today is vastly different than what it was, when Ed first went into office, and you had incidents like Chernobyl in the 80s in the Ukraine. Today, we could put 4 small modular reactors across the Commonwealth, only 4. They take about 2 acres each, that's all. Okay. These are not major big plants. And we would power 40% of the 2.9 million residential homes in the Commonwealth and drive prices down. But Senator Markey won't even consider nuclear. And I think, with all due respect, I think it's because he's been in office so long that he's reminded of Chernobyl and he's not looking at the technology. That's like comparing a computer that when Ed first went into office, a computer was the size of the studio. And today it can be held in your hand. And same applies to nuclear energy. And by the way, nuclear energy is 97% efficient and carbon free. It's a net zero carbon emission. It makes all the sense in the world, but Senator Markey won't even consider it, and he focuses on the offshore wind and solar only.
Where in Massachusetts would you put these for? Because there's been talk about even potentially putting them around here.
Well, again, I want people to understand that nuclear isn't like these big, big power plants. We're talking about a nuclear reactor is the size of, maybe 2 feet, and it's in a much smaller, you only need 1 or 2 acres of land, as opposed to solar and wind, you need hundreds of acres. Right. I would put one in Sandwich, Mass, where a power plant used to be, Plymouth. I would put one in Pittsfield and Central Mass. And you would cover the Cape, and you'd have both the South and North Shore covered, Western Mass and Central. Again, 40%. We would drive costs down and be carbon free. It makes all the sense in the world. So that's like a big issue for me. And unfortunately, Senator Markey will still press the Green New Deal. And I want everyone out there to know that the Green New Deal did come for a vote on the Senate floor. He wrote it, he co-wrote it, and he didn't vote yes. He voted present. And because it's theater, Paul. With all due respect, Senator Markey, it's political theater, and on top of that, it has no chance in passing. It's estimated to be between $50 and $100 trillion. It's just never going to pass. And so instead of just going up there and saying, Green New Deal, which won't pass, let's get to the table, come up with a common sense plan to drive those energy prices down. Okay,
so energy, anything else that you would say is big on your list of things that you would do differently?
I appreciate that. Healthcare. Healthcare is a big deal. You want to know why the Affordable Care Act, Paul, isn't affordable? Because it allowed 3 insurance companies who are vertically integrated, all the way from manufacturing to the pharmacy, to control over 90% of our health care. What we need is a Republican like Teddy Roosevelt, who came in and broke the oil barons, the railroad tycoons, and the steel industry that was monopolistic. He broke those monopolies up, and small businesses and competition thrived. My plan would break those 3 vertically integrated insurance companies up. It would expand telehealth. There's no reason that a doctor in New Hampshire can't do telehealth to someone in Western Mass, for example. Also, we have no transparency in this country on health care. And I want everybody to understand this, Paul. If your microwave or mine goes out tonight, you and I can get online and we can search prices and brands all across the country. But you're not allowed to do that for blood thinner, for diabetes. So we got to implement that transparency. Ed, with all due respect, Senator Markey is going to say, Medicare for all. And it's never going to pass. And you don't, what you do is you take the good parts of our health care, and you keep those parts, which we have 180 million people on health care, private insurance, and you get rid of the bad stuff, lack of transparency, the monopolies. There's 23 million Americans who don't have insurance. My plan insures them. I don't experiment with a whole new government-operated system. And let's face it, when the government's in charge of everything, it's not efficient. So healthcare is a big thing. And I just have, I think, fresher ideas instead of Medicare for all and Green New Deal.
Well, Medicare, I believe, has been shown to be the most efficient healthcare program. So why are you opposed to that, or even any kind of single-payer plan?
No, I'm not. I'm opposed to the government. Right now, we have 180 million people on private insurance. It doesn't make sense to me that we strip them of their private insurance and go with a whole new government-run system. And also, Medicare, we have a lot of rampant fraud in Medicaid and Medicare. It's being discovered here in the Commonwealth by the state auditor, who is a Democrat, and the U.S. attorney, who's a Republican. And so I'm a free market person who believes that if you have real competition, real capitalism, it can work. The problem in America is that capitalism that we have today, Paul, isn't real capitalism. It's crony capitalism. It's monopolistic corporate socialism, because we are giving all of these subsidies to these 3 vertically integrated insurance companies. Just so everyone knows, as a private employer, I pay 100% of my medical costs for my employees, and I only have a few.
What's this?
My law firm.
Okay.
And I just got for 4 employees and myself, $77,000 bill that I have to pay for 4 employees. That's crazy, is what I'm saying. And that's because of these 3 companies that are controlling over 90%. So you don't hear Ed Markey talking about that. Here, I'm a Republican talking about breaking up these conglomerates. And that's what we need. We need a fresh approach to these problems.
So I want to move on to a couple of more issues, but you mentioned it a couple of times now about your sort of party alliances. I understand party alliance labels can be misleading and maybe not even useful, but are you comfortable with the party you're in, based on hearing some of your comments that you're making?
Well, sure, because I view myself as a true Massachusetts Republican. I think if JFK were alive today, he'd be a Massachusetts Republican and kicked out of the Democrat Party, because I think it's moved too far left. I've said that I didn't support President Trump. You know, I personally hate this division in this country, right? Even within the parties, you have division. And I stood on the stage with Elizabeth Warren, and I'm the guy who said to Elizabeth Warren, because she was saying, the only reason she said not to vote for me was because I was a Republican. And I said, because she was trying to tie me to like MAGA and all of, you know, the sort of extreme politics. Even though I didn't support President Trump, she called me a Trump supporter. Because these career politicians, they don't let truth get in the way of their narrative, Paul. And I stood on stage and said, I have news for Senator Warren, who says that Republicans are bad, Democrats are good. They all suck. And what's the problem in this country are career politicians. Mitch McConnell should go. He's a Republican. Ed Markey should go. Chuck Schumer should go. Chuck Grassley is a Republican. He's 92 years old. He's been in Senate for 50 years. He should go. Career politicians have sold working families out because all they care about is staying in power. They've never balanced a budget in their life. They don't even talk about it. They don't even compromise anymore. I don't know, Paul, what day in our country, in the Senate, the word compromise became such an evil word.
Where would you, if you're in favor of termless, how would you draw the line and why?
2 terms for a senator, that gives you 12 years.
But why?
Because if you can't make change in regular people's lives in more than a decade in Washington, then it's time for someone else to have an opportunity. Plus, when you stay in the Senate or the Congress for too long, Paul, you end up compromising your principles. You start horse trading. You start saying, well, you know what, I would never vote for this under normal circumstances, but they promised me that on my bill next year, they're going to support it if I support that. You start doing that. We should just go to, like, have some common sense. For example, why don't we have single issue bills? The Ukraine funding bill should be called the Ukraine funding bill. It shouldn't be mixed in with Social Security and education and elderly and veterans benefits. A spending bill shouldn't be 2,000 pages and printed less than 24 hours before the vote.
So, okay, we have limited time. I want to get to
Sure.
housing is a big issue in
Yes.
Winthrop. I mean, I realize 3A, the housing law that Winthrop is caught up in, is a state issue, not a federal issue. But there's efforts at the federal level to do something about the housing, what a lot of people think of as a housing crisis in the country, a shortage of housing. Briefly, what would you do?
Great question. There is a crisis. Here's the first thing I do. I have a housing plan that's 5 million homes in 5 years. It's nationwide, obviously, but it includes Massachusetts, where we take federal land and state-owned land that's not being used. And we use that in conjunction with tax credits for developers to develop affordable housing. I also, part of my plan is a first-time home buyers nationwide program. But if you actually incentivize the behavior you want, then you can get it. The other problem here in Massachusetts, and I know this because I've talked to affordable housing builders in New Bedford and Fall River just the other week. It takes 2 years to pull permits here just to build housing. We've got to cut through that red tape. Also, we were talking about these alternative energy mandates. In New Bedford, for Section 8 housing for poor people, they won't build the houses because they're not allowed to tap into natural gas because of the mandates. They have to be electric only. And because they can't build it and make profit at all, they're just not building. And so we need to cut through that regulation, get rid of some of these mandates that don't make sense. Natural gas as a bridge is perfectly acceptable. Of course, you expand nuclear and hydro and geothermal and solar and onshore wind. You do all those things. But that's an example that impacts housing as well.
And what about the link? You haven't mentioned transportation, and certainly there's a lot of talk that transportation and housing are very intricately related. How do you see your housing plans tying in with anything you have to say about transportation?
I think that what we need to do is I'm in support, and that's why also, great question, Paul, because we need an advocate in the United States Senate. For example, we need to invest in a rail that connects Western Mass to Boston. That would solve a lot of the transportation issues, yet there's no talk of it. And when you have someone like Senator Markey or someone like Seth Moulton, whose only message is, I'm going to fight Trump and I'm going to be no to Trump on everything, you know, if that's your stance when the other opposition party is in office, you'll never be able to get dollars for your state. Your job isn't for a party. It's for the people of Massachusetts. That's why I go to Washington, and Ed Markey is a no matter what President Trump says, right? Okay. I'm not a yes. I'm a maybe.
Okay.
Prove to me how it's good for the people of Massachusetts, and I'll support it. And if it's not, I won't. And they would need is federal funds to help get that housing, get that transportation that connects Western Mass. You know, this is what I point out. This is what I meant, Paul, goes to your first question. And this is very important for me to communicate. They have taken people's vote for granted because, you know, they say there's no chance for a Republican in Massachusetts. It's got to be Democrats. And there's only one party in control. When they passed the infrastructure bill, Democrats were in control. Joe Biden was the office. They had $110 billion attributed to bridges. Not $1 of that infrastructure bill went to the Cape Cod bridges that are functionally obsolete. That's an example where they're in office and their party, you don't get anything. And then when Trump or the Republicans come in office, they're so antagonistic against it that there will be nothing for Massachusetts. So let's send someone who will go there and say, one test, good for Massachusetts and America, I'm all in.
All right, let's try to get through a few more before we run out of time.
Yes.
One is Winthrop is a coastal town, as is a lot of Massachusetts. There's a big questions as to what to do, where to get the funding for it, whether maybe there should be more thought to buying out properties and just getting away. Do you have sort of a big picture sense on what to do about that kind of situation where the federal government should be playing a different role in that?
In the role in
terms of the fact that there's the floodwaters are, you know, the flood issue is becoming more and more of a prominent issue along the coast of Massachusetts, including in this town. What should the federal government be doing about that?
The federal government should be doing a lot about that because that's something that affects. That's why I said to you earlier, like climate change is an issue, right? It's an issue. I just think that paying your rent and being able to afford your electric bill right now is more of a priority. And so that's why you need an advocate, whether it is to invest in the infrastructure that protects those housings, because we can't just say goodbye. You know, I mean, the choice for people is to sell and then sell to some multi-billion-dollar developer who then comes in and increases, you know, the property values and prices people out of the community. So we need the federal government to be a partner with the state in how to invest infrastructure-wise to protect from those rising oceans.
Well, should the federal government be buying out more homes?
The federal government?
Yes, be part of a plan to buy out more homes along the coast and just get people out of danger areas.
Well, sure. I mean, that's, if there's a safety issue, that's sure. You know, I hesitate only when you say when the federal government, if they're buying the people from eminent domain and giving them fair market value for their homes because of danger, that's a different situation. I fear that the government maybe would be unfair to those people, though. So it all comes down, you know, look, theoretically, it sounds like it's an option, but the devil's in the details.
Okay. Immigration's a big issue here in this town. We've had you know, not as many ICE visits maybe as some, but it's an issue, and there's people who think that it's a good thing and people who think it's not a good thing. Where do you come down on that, and what should the federal government be doing?
Well, the problem is we go from one extreme to the other. We go from completely open border, and I went to the border, and Border Patrol told me, security told me that it was 12 million people that crossed illegally during the Biden administration. And then we go from that extreme to we go to, you know, mass deportations in the community. But the problem here, Paul, is that under the Obama administration, the cities, the mayor and the governor cooperated. When a person was arrested in Weymouth, I'm just picking Weymouth, okay, or Plymouth, immediately when they were arrested, their fingerprints and their arrest information was shared with the FBI and shared with ICE. And when that person was going to be released from custody, ICE would be informed, ICE would show up at the jail, and there would be a person would be detained and deported. We instituted these sanctuary policies that don't distinguish between someone who's been here for 5 years, 10 years working versus someone who crossed here last year and committed child rape. There's no, we just say no cooperation with the federal government. And what happens then is because there is no cooperation, they show up in Home Depot, they show up at Walmart, and that's not healthy. So we just got to have common sense. Let's go back to the policy of cooperation. That doesn't mean you condone everything that President Trump does, but you should be able to work with the federal government to say, we'll help you get the bad guys. And when I say bad guys, I don't mean illegal migrants who came here who are just trying to better life. I'm talking about illegal migrants who came here illegally and committed a crime.
Any crime or some level of
A felony.
A felony.
Okay, a felony. Now, at the same time, deportation has to be part of an immigration plan. President Obama deported 3.1 million people in 8 years.
Right.
Yet we didn't have all the stuff that we've had here because there was cooperation. And that's the problem that we have, is we go from one extreme to the other. It's almost in every topic. Immigration is a topic that we go from one extreme to the other. Regulation versus deregulation. I think people are just ready for like some common sense.
Well, in some of the answers you've talked about political realities, and the political reality in Washington that you'd be going into is a Senate that's been basically going along with all this. So I guess I'm trying to understand how you would come into that Senate, that environment, and change that.
Someone has to stand up. You know, this is the thing, Paul, that I would push back on certain people. They say, when is a Republican going to stand up to President Trump? Then when the Republican comes, like me, that doesn't vote for President Trump, who runs in a Republican primary, not supporting the top of the ticket, you want to know what they say? Don't vote for him, he's a Republican. Right. I mean, listen, let's go back to voting for who the best candidate is. Sometimes to everyone out there, that candidate could be a Democrat. Put Ed Markey up versus Lindsey Graham.
Okay.
Lindsey Graham's a Republican. I'd vote for Ed Markey. Put Ed Markey versus me, John Deaton, and I think I'm the better candidate. We got to go back to that test.
So many more. Abortion. It's an issue, I believe, for you. Can you want to say briefly where you are on that and why?
I'm pro-choice. I support a woman's right. I'm a father of 3 daughters. I support a woman's right up until a certain point, like most Americans. I don't favor late-term abortions in the final trimester, for example, unless there's an anomaly, if the fetus is dead or the life of the mother's at risk. A pretty common sense approach, just like I think the majority of Bay Staters have here.
Okay. Cryptocurrency, is that a big issue for you? And
well, it's not an issue for me. That's a great example, though, of what I just said. We go from one extreme to the other, meaning that under the Biden administration, Elizabeth Warren, when she ran for re-election, said she was building an anti-crypto army.
Okay.
And what we did is you had the government's boot on the neck of an industry.
Okay.
Now we go from that extreme to the Trump coin. Like, how about some middle of the road approaches to this? So cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, we want to lead. America wants to lead in those technologies, but crypto itself isn't an issue that I'm running on.
Oh, because I thought I'd seen you had talked about it a bit. I'm sorry if that's
No,
not
no.
the case.
Well, I mean, I disclosed when I was running against Elizabeth Warren that I had the most of my majority of my net worth in Bitcoin.
I see.
Because it's a hard asset.
I see.
When you print trillions of dollars every year, you're debasing the U.S. dollar every time. We've lost 95% of our purchasing power in the last 30 years of the U.S. dollar. So I've just bought a hard asset. It's like gold, digital gold. Right. But what I mean by it's not a issue, meaning if you ask all the Bay Staters out there, you know, list the top 10 issues that you're worried about, crypto wouldn't be one.
I hear you. Okay. One that is, last one I think we'll leave with, which is something that the incumbent is big on, which is daylight savings time. Where are you on that?
You know, I've never been asked that. It's a great question. I think it's time to get rid of it.
Time to get rid of it. Okay.
Yep.
Not to go long on this one, but the issue is that parents have children, and that becomes an issue for them in terms of the bus drop-offs in the dark. I'm just wondering if you have any sympathy for that? Or?
Well, no, I have. Listen, I have a 7-year-old. My daughter Layla is in the 1st grade, and so who gets picked up by the bus. Actually, she gets driven home with the bus. I drive her to school every morning. So no, I understand. I don't have a. It's not a burning issue for me. So. Okay. That's why you kind of stumped me, because no one's ever asked me that, and I never really thought about it. Yeah. So my gut was, was to say, probably makes sense to get rid of it. But, you could probably sit here, Paul, you probably could talk me out of it, to be honest with you.
Not going to be what I'm going to do. But in any event, John Deaton, candidate for U.S. Senate, thank you very much for the time here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.